This is my assignment for February 6th, 2013. I'm answering what were the relative strengths and weaknesses of the sides at the onset of the American Revolution. An outline of the video will be, I'll first discuss the British strengths, then the British weaknesses, then the colonial strengths, and the colonial weaknesses. The British strengths dealt mostly with their military, their resources, and their experience. Concerning their military, Wood points out on page 81 that not only was their army successful, but their navy was the largest in the world, that their army was a well-trained professional force numbering at one point in 1778 nearly 50,000 troops, and that was just in North America. They also hired Hessians to add to those numbers. Britain also had money and resources from various colonial outposts and came to war with its reputation of military success. Despite these strengths, they also encompassed many weaknesses regarding their terrain, supplies, and isolationism. The British were on enemy territory, over 3,000 miles away from their home across the Atlantic Ocean, and this territory was dangerous. On page 77, Wood points out that the great breadth of territory and the wild nature of the terrain make conventional maneuverings and operations difficult and cumbersome. Getting over those terrain also required supply lines, which he also points out on page 81, where it's sometimes 3 miles long. Not only were the Patriots also made transportation over roadways difficult by destroying bridges or chopping down trees. The British also experienced political isolationism, especially after their recent wars with the French. The colonial strengths focused around the support they received, the terrain they knew, and their ideology. The colonials received support from France and Spain. It was also on their home turf. They knew the terrain and were able to get supplies easier as well. They also had the ideology, or their fighting spirit, fighting for their rights, and something that they were passionate about. Ramsay on page 191 also notes that the way it unfolded led to their success. Wood states that nothing contributes more to the success of revolutions than mind, that intemperate zealots overshoot themselves and soon spend their force while the calm and dispassionate persevere to the end, suggesting that it was good that it took the war this long to unfold. Lastly, the colonial weaknesses. The colonial military was smaller and inexperienced. Wood on page 88 points out that it had little first-hand knowledge of combat for anyone in their military. Ramsay on page 194 notes that George Washington even stated that my abilities and military inexperience may not be equal, comparing themselves to the British military. Additionally, on page 230, Ramsay points out, so unacquainted were the bulk of the people with the mode of carrying on modern war, and that by 1775, the whole American army amounted to no more than 9,650 men. The colonies also lacked the money needed to feed soldiers for supplies and to fight the war. On page 195, Ramsay points out that they wrote bills of credit that were required to support the war. Despite these weaknesses, we do know how the war eventually did end.